Okay, ready for a deep dive today. You guys sent in this podcast episode about the 10 people you need in your life from a faith perspective. We're going to unpack it. Even if you're not coming from a religious angle, I think the ideas about human connection are super relevant. What jumps out at you from this list?
It's so interesting how they frame these essential relationships in terms of spiritual growth. And they even suggest having friends with different belief systems, which is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump in. The first person on the list is the friend who is a true disciple of Christ. Okay, so putting specific religious beliefs aside for a moment, what do you think the core concept here is?
I think it's about having someone in your life who reflects your values, someone who will hold you accountable.
Yeah, it's more than just having a cheerleader. It's someone who can give you constructive criticism even when it's hard to hear because it's coming from a place of shared values. That tough love kind of thing.
Exactly. And the podcast uses a quote from Proverbs that I think sums it up perfectly. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful.
Oof, that's powerful. It really speaks to how valuable honest feedback can be, especially when it comes from someone you trust.
And it's not just about pointing out flaws, it's also about celebrating each other's wins and being there for each other during tough times, which actually leads perfectly into the next two people on the list, the companion in trials and the prayer partner.
Okay, so whether or not prayer is part of your life, we can all relate to needing a solid support system when things get rough.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder if maybe they grouped these three people together intentionally.
Yeah, there's a definite theme of accountability, support, and shared values running through all three. What's fascinating to me is how much research backs up this idea that accountability helps us reach our goals.
Oh, yeah. There are tons of studies showing that when we share our goals with someone we trust, we're way more likely to actually achieve them. It's like having a built in cheerleader. Yeah.
And a gentle nudge in the right direction.
Exactly.
So speaking of expanding your horizons, the next person on the list really stood out to me. They call this person the non-Christian friend, suggesting it's important to let your light shine in places where darkness resides. So putting the religious context aside for a sec, what do you think about the idea of having friends with different perspectives than your own?
I think it's incredibly important. When we only surround ourselves with people who agree with us, we risk falling into an echo chamber.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly reinforcing our own biases without ever being challenged to think differently.
Right. And exposing ourselves to diverse viewpoints, even ones that we might not initially agree with, helps us develop something called cognitive flexibility.
Which basically means being able to see things from different angles.
Exactly. And that's an invaluable life skill.
Especially these days with how algorithms curate our online experience, it's so easy to get stuck in our own little bubbles.
Absolutely.
So for those listening, how can you actively seek out these perspective-shifting relationships?
Well, joining clubs or groups with diverse interests is a great way, or even just striking up conversations with people from different backgrounds.
Because putting yourself out there.
Yeah, those small interactions can make a big difference.
So the next two people on the list bring up some really deep themes. We have the person with whom you have been reconciled and the generous giver. So what do you see linking these two together?
Well, I see a common thread of forgiveness, personal growth, and the ripple effect of positive actions.
Forgiveness can be such a tough thing. The podcast quotes Proverbs again. He who covers a transgression seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates friends. It's about letting go of past hurts to actually bring people closer, which is easier said than done sometimes.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
But there's so much research on the power of forgiveness.
It's interesting that forgiveness isn't just good for our relationships. It actually benefits us personally, too.
Yeah, studies have shown that it's linked to reduced stress and anxiety, and even improved physical health.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's like we're freeing ourselves from carrying around all that negativity.
And speaking of positivity, the podcast also highlights the generous giver. And they're not just talking about someone who showers you with gifts. It's more about someone who embodies a giving spirit and inspires you to do the same.
Right. It's about those people who see a need and jump in to help, whether it's with their time, their skills, or just a listening ear.
The podcast quotes Luke 6:38. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. It's about that beautiful concept that when we give freely, we receive abundance in return.
And that abundance isn't always material.
Right? It can be emotional, spiritual, or relational.
Exactly.
So now we're moving into the realm of mentorship and collaboration. With the mentor who reflects Christ and the collaborators in the kingdom, let's just think of this as the value of mentorship, learning from others, and finding inspiration in shared goals.
Mentorship is such a valuable thing, having someone who can guide you, share their wisdom, and help you navigate tricky decisions.
And I love the idea of collaborators, finding those people who are just as passionate about something as you are, and working together to achieve something bigger than you could alone.
Yeah, combining your skills and perspectives to create something amazing.
I want to hear from you listening right now. Have you had a mentor who's really impacted your life? What qualities make someone a great mentor? And what about collaboration? Have you had any really rewarding experiences working with others towards a shared goal?
I think it's so cool how these roles often intertwine. A mentor can become a collaborator and vice versa.
It's all about finding people who inspire you and empower you. Okay, we're down to the last two people on the list, and they're all about the power of positivity and empathy. First up, the joyful soul. Now, who wouldn't want more joy in their life, right?
Tersely.
The podcast really emphasizes surrounding yourself with people who radiate positivity, especially when you're going through tough times.
It's amazing how contagious joy can be.
When you're around someone with a sunny disposition, it just lifts you up. They even quote Philippians 4:4, rejoice in the Lord always.
Yeah.
So regardless of your religious beliefs, the message is clear. Cultivating joy is key for a fulfilling life.
It's about choosing to focus on the good, even amidst challenges.
Finding those sparks of gratitude.
Exactly.
And finally, we have the listener who empathizes. This is all about having someone who creates a safe space for you to share your thoughts and feelings. Someone who truly listens without judgment.
Empathy is so crucial for building strong relationships. It's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
Really trying to understand their perspective.
Right. And responding with compassion and kindness.
The podcast quotes Galatians 6:2 here. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. It's about how much we can support each other through tough times.
And sometimes the best way to support someone is just to listen.
Without offering advice or trying to fix things.
Just being present with them and their experience.
So there you have it. 10 types of people this faith-based podcast suggests we need in our lives. But as we've talked about, there's so much universal wisdom here. It's about building a network of support, accountability, and inspiration. Surrounding yourself with people who challenge you, support you, and help you grow.
And recognizing the value of diversity in those relationships, too. Seeking out different perspectives, backgrounds, and experiences.
Because those differences are what make life so rich. So as you think about these 10 types of people, who do you already have in your life? And are there any missing pieces? Remember, this isn't about checking boxes. It's about looking at the quality of your connections and considering how you can cultivate an even stronger network of relationships.
What's really stood out to me is that relationships are so much more than just casual connections. They're incredible opportunities for growth, support, and understanding.
That's a great point. And before we wrap up, there's one more thought that I wanted to share from the podcast. They really emphasized being intentional about building these relationships. It's not about waiting for these people to magically appear. It's about actively seeking them out and making the effort.
That's a really good point.
So I want to leave you all with a challenge. Think about the qualities you're looking for in each of these 10 types of people. Where might you find them? What can you do to start building those connections?
Don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone. Join a new club, volunteer for a cause you care about. Strike up a conversation with someone you admire.
You never know where you'll find your next great connection.
Exactly.
What a great note to end on. It's about being proactive, being open, and embracing the journey of building a fulfilling and supportive network.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay.
It just hit me as we were talking about being intentional, with building these relationships. These roles can change over time.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, it's not like we find these 10 people and they're stuck in those roles forever.
Yeah.
People change and grow.
Right, and our relationships change with them.
So someone who starts as a companion in trials could later become a mentor.
Exactly. And someone could even be multiple things at the same time.
Oh, for sure. Like your prayer partner could also be your joyful soul.
Exactly.
It's like that saying, sometimes our friends are our soulmates.
It is.
Your collaborator could also be your listener.
It really shows how fluid human connection is. These 10 roles are a good framework. But relationships are more complex than that. It's not about putting people in boxes.
It's about appreciating how those connections can change. It reminds me of this study I read about how having lots of different relationships with people who give you different kinds of support. That's super important for your health and happiness.
It makes sense. It's like a balanced diet. You need a balanced social diet, too.
We've been talking about relationships like a tapestry, and that really fits here. Our relationships are like those individual threads.
And you never know which thread will be the strongest.
Sometimes it's the people you least expect, so we've talked about a lot. But the thing that sticks with me is this idea of intentionality. We can choose what our relationships look like. We don't have to just wait for them to happen.
Right. You have to put in the effort.
So what are some things people listening can do to build these relationships?
Think about what you're looking for in each of these roles, and then go find people like that. Join a group volunteer for something. Talk to someone you admire.
Sometimes the smallest actions can make a big difference.
Totally.
So we've talked a lot about how these 10 people can support us. But I was thinking, it's important to think about how we can support them, too.
Yeah, for sure. Relationships go both ways.
It's not all about us.
Right.
Like, we might be someone's companion in trials today, but tomorrow, we might be the one needing support.
Exactly. It goes back and forth.
Sometimes you're the mentor,
Yeah.
and sometimes you need a mentor.
It's all connected.
So as we think about these 10 types of people, let's also think about how we can be those people for others. How can we be someone's joyful soul or their listener who empathizes?
You need to pay attention to the people around us. Are we really listening? Are we offering to help?
Even small things can make a difference.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've talked about being intentional, but what are some actual things people can do to build these relationships?
Well, think about the qualities we talked about for each person, and then look for people like that. Join a group volunteer for something. Talk to someone you look up to.
Don't be afraid to just start a conversation.
Right. You never know what it could lead to.
And what about relationships you already have?
Think about how you can make them stronger.
Reach out to someone you haven't talked to in a while.
Tell someone you appreciate them.
What I've realized from this deep dive is that our relationships are so important. They really shape who we are.
It's true. We need each other.
So I want you to think about the people in your life who are like these 10 people. Be thankful for them. And think about how you can be that kind of person for someone else.
Building good relationships is one of the best things you can do.
I completely agree. So that wraps up our deep dive for today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep growing.
And remember, the journey is always better with others.